11 years ago this week, I'd just come home from hospital after a difficult delivery with my youngest child. I was very overwhelmed, very exhausted, and pretty desperate. Despite teaching parenting courses and having spent years studying psychology, I was really stumped. I thought I was doing everything the book said, and I was certainly trying my best. Why couldn't I bring our family out of chaos? What was interesting was that the message I was receiving from the doctors and midwives and other health professionals I was in contact with was underwhelming. Of course you're tired. What do you expect? You're a mother of 3. Everyone's in the same boat. No one has enough support. This is all normal. I'm not sure if that was supposed to be reassuring or alarming, but a decade later, my work with parents and families confirms this sad pattern. En masse, parents are really struggling, ping-ponging between their own lack of capacity to cope and trying to manage their children's very dysregulated behaviour. But I became really fascinated with this problem. Why are we all struggling? What is going so wrong for so many of us? What I've come to see is that there's a pattern to this chaos. A vicious, self-perpetuating cycle that keeps so many families stuck in stress and overwhelm. I want to show you how this cycle works and some practical steps that you can take to start shifting yourself out of these patterns so that a different pattern can start for your family, starting today. 2 parts of this problem were really blatantly obvious, even to exhausted 11 years ago me. First, I was exhausted. I had no energy. Second, my children's behaviour was very challenging for me to manage. And to a certain extent, I could understand how these two related. The reality is that dealing with challenging behaviour every day is exhausting, beyond exhausting. Breaking up fights, dealing with tantrums, looking into the cold, detached face of your child while they rage at you. This is highly stressful stuff, and rather than receiving the support and care we need to deal with this, parents are often blamed and ridiculed for these difficult situations. And I could also see that the more exhausted I got from all of this behaviour, the less capacity I had to manage these situations in a way that was helpful. I was less able to be present with my children, to empathise, to connect with them. I was withdrawing, and the more I withdrew, the more challenging all of my children's behaviour became. What I've come to realise through research and my work with parents over the last decade is that there are some important bits of this puzzle that are missing. There's a broader social context that our modern parenting endeavours take place within. When you put these pieces in, we can reveal that it's not an individual one-off miserable situation. This is a broad, widespread miserable situation that many of us are facing together. This is a social problem, not an individual problem. The first part that was invisible to me at the time was that I needed a lot more support than I had access to. I needed practical hands-on help. I needed help with the dishes and the laundry. I needed time to rest and recuperate. I needed other loving adults to care for my children so that I could recharge my batteries. I needed a whole social network that just didn't exist. To really understand how wide the gap is between the amount of support we actually need as parents and the amount most of us are able to access, we need to understand that our children's brains and nervous systems evolved at a time when society looked incredibly different from our modern context. They developed at a time when the average child had 15 or so loving adults to care for them. Not one parent, not 2 parents, not 2 parents and an occasional grandparent, not a continuously rotating roster of underpaid daycare staff. No, 10 to 20 highly involved, loving adults who actively cared for that child. You can learn more about this here if you want to, but the important bit is that the social isolation that most of us experience while raising our children, combined with the pressure of fast-paced modern life, leaves so many of us exhausted and under-resourced. Most parents today do not have the support, resources and inner capacity to give the depth of connection that our children's biology anticipates. We just don't. Our modern world prioritizes money and efficiency and entertainment and profits and materialism, but not making sure that our children get the quality and depth of connection that their biology needs. They are the very bottom of this priority heap. Due to the absence of this proverbial village, our children are often reliant entirely on us, their parents, to provide all of their vital connection needs. The kind of paid support we are able to access, things like school, daycare, after-school care, may give us a break from caring for our children, but only in order to go to work and participate in this economic machine. They're neither giving us the rest we need to restore our energy, or our children the consistent loving connection that they need. And here's where things get really interesting. The part of this whole modern parenting conundrum that 11 years ago me didn't fully understand until my sweet children taught me is that children will work really hard to make sure that they receive the connection that their evolutionary programming tells them that they need. Children will work like their survival depends on it to maintain the relationship with us, because guess what? Their survival does depend on it. Connection with us is what allows them to get all of their other basic needs met, including food, water, shelter. Connection is therefore the most important need for them. So when a child can't secure the unconditional love and affection that they crave, it places their nervous system in a state of stress. What this looks like can vary a lot between children depending on their developmental level, their temperament, their place in the family, and so on. But what's common to all children is that if they aren't receiving the level of connection that their wiring tells them they need, our life is going to become very challenging indeed. If we don't recognize why our children are doing these things, all of this can just look like bad behavior, willfulness, defiance, oppositional behavior, problems with attention, rather than seeing that so much of this behavior is our desperate children using whatever behavioral tactics are available to them to secure the amount of connection they need, the amount of connection that our modern world doesn't support us to provide. And here's how this whole cycle played out for me, and also for so many other families I've worked with. Without the support, I was left drained and depleted, struggling to survive each day. I didn't have the inner resources or external support I needed to give my children the connection that their nervous systems needed to stay regulated. Without the connection, my children's behaviour escalated. Trying to cope with all this challenging behaviour and conflict used up what little energy I might have had for building connection with my children. It also meant that I had nothing left over to engage external support and create the community that I desperately needed. And round we go in an ever accelerating vicious cycle. Now, this would just be a sad story if it weren't for the fact that when we start to understand this dynamic, we're finally able to see where we should put our very precious and limited energy in order to make a change and free ourselves from this vicious cycle. Time and time again, I've seen the downward current that was pulling a family down gradually reverse until it became a powerful force lifting them up. And I want to show you exactly how to fix this. What makes a difference is making small and practical changes at various points in this cycle. At first, these changes will be small. It takes a while to slow this momentum and reverse the cycle, but over time they will add up to a change in the flow, in the direction. In this way, it's possible to create a positive, self-sustaining cycle that will lift you and your children up in the direction of more connection, more support, more harmony. Because think about this for a moment. Imagine if you had enough support, if you were really surrounded by the amount of community and practical care and attention that you needed. How much more energy would you have? How much more could you put into creating deep, affectionate, loving relationships with your children? Imagine if your children experience regular, frequent, consistent affection from you. And imagine if your children were operating from a settled, calm, cooperative state more of the time. How much more energy would you have to pour back into your relationship with your child and to pour into creating more community support? The momentum of the world we live in may be pulling us down, but our evolutionary wiring and our children's is pushing in the other direction. The reason that small interventions at any one of these points are so incredibly powerful is that they work with the way you and your child's nervous system were designed by evolution. So strategic low energy changes, micro habits that we can introduce at any of these points can nudge us powerfully in this upward direction. We're talking compound interest here. Tiny changes that add up and go a long way to changing how our family functions. You can start anywhere, but often a good place to start is with your energy. Investing in yourself, building your capacity, and caring for your own resources. This is because this is the thing you have most direct control over and can start straight away, like right now. If you build your capacity, you will have more energy for everything else in this cycle. You are the most important thing in this system. So starting on yourself is not an act of selfishness, it's an act of sanity and necessity. Learning to care for yourself is an act of enormous love for your children. Now, the idea of self-care has been so co-opted by corporations and marketing that we might immediately think of shampoo and chocolate, or even very difficult to achieve things like expensive holidays or yoga retreats. But the type of self-care that can make a big difference straight away is much smaller and simpler than this, and cheaper. It's free. It's learning to notice your own feelings and your own needs moment by moment. It's like picking up the internal telephone that's been ringing frantically and listening. What are you feeling? What are you needing? This is something I have a whole playlist about if you're interested to learn more. Over time, what this kind of practice does is transforms your conscious experience of the world. And importantly, when you start learning to care for yourself, you will naturally start to have a little more resource, a little more energy to connect with your children. And this is where the evolutionary magic really kicks in, because it turns out that deeply connected children are much easier to parent. To see the magic for yourself, think back to the last time your child felt really easy to parent, like really easy, like effortless. If you like, you can put it in the comments below. My guess is that it was a moment when they felt unconditionally loved, safe, and connected. And this is because the parts of our children's brains that allow them to behave compassionately, lovingly, cooperatively, kindly, are only accessible to them when they feel loved, safe, and connected. So when we're able to bring children into our bubble of loving affection regularly and frequently, their wiring takes over and they will naturally soften and become easier to parent. And no, I don't mean that you'll never disagree again or they'll always do everything you tell them to. But what does happen is that all of this can take place within a softness of the connection that you have. There are many specific tools of connection that you can learn and that I teach in our courses, including skills of empathic listening and how to hear your child's pain and so on. But a micro habit that can start turning this around for you today is to think of each moment that you're with your child as a chance to build connection. Imagine a big white wall that needs to be painted. Each time you're with your child is a chance to add one more stroke of colour. Each touch, each smile, each time you use warm words, each time you make eye contact, each time you laugh together, play together. Each of these are low energy but powerful ways to build connection. And the trick here is the regularity, the frequency of these acts. Each and every time you're with your child, try one small, deliberate, conscious act to create connection. Now, many of us were not taught how to do this, and it may be that you never received the love and affection that you needed from your own parents. If so, you're not alone. So if you feel completely overwhelmed at how to create connection, I have a really simple formula that you can use right here. As the connection with our children is strengthened, their challenging behavior will naturally reduce. But when there is challenging behavior, there are all sorts of tools and techniques we can use to handle these behavioral challenges in a more peaceful way. For my money, the most important skill that we can learn in handling our children's behavior in a more peaceful way, in a way that's going to nurture the connection, is to learn to interpret all of their behavior, even the really challenging stuff, as an indication of their needs. Everything they do is telling you something about their needs. So if you're able to take these steps, then you're likely to build enough capacity to have the energy you need to go out and find some additional support to start building your community up again. But for 11 years ago me, this was actually the first step I needed to take. I was too depleted to start this process off alone. Sometimes we just need a little bit of external support to give us the kickstart we need to take the first step. If this is you, I really want to be that support for you now and encourage you to take a step that you need towards getting more support. So try this now. Write down one step you feel able to take today to reach out for some external support. You can put this in the chat if you like, or write it on a piece of paper. This could be as small as I'm going to text a friend and ask if they want a cup of tea, or subscribing to this channel to get weekly learning and support, or asking for babysitting so that you can go have a nap tomorrow afternoon. Or it could be a bigger step. like reaching out for counselling, coaching, or finding an in-person or online community of parents who are working together to make these changes. Even small changes can make an enormous difference to your capacity. As you are able to take small steps towards building a support network, you're going to start to feel less alone, less isolated. Even a little bit more support will give you more energy to start building connections for yourself, for your children, and for your community. We can't change the historical moment we're born into, but we can make a dramatic difference to our ability to cope and our children's ability to thrive by paying attention to this cycle. And perhaps the place where I see most people feel stuck with all of this is at the level of behaviour. It can be so exhausting to deal with our children's anger and overwhelm that many parents find it hard to make changes anywhere else. So if you want to learn how to support your child to reduce their dysregulation and overwhelm, have a look here.